Revelation by the numbers, or the numbers in Revelation, and how we can understand whether they're literal or figurative, it really isn't that difficult. Context, other scripture passages that deal with the same things, and really, with context and other scripture passages, then common sense is going to tell you what's literal or not. We certainly wouldn't take or say that the number 7, when it applies and is used with the churches in Asia Minor, the trumpets, the seals, the bowls, that 7 is figurative. You can sit down and you can count. There's 7 churches. There's 7 seals that are open. There's 7 bowls, so forth and so on. The same with the number 12. You know, we know that there were 12 sons of Jacob. You can go back to Genesis and you can count them. We know that there were 12 apostles. You can sit down and count them. They're not figurative. When it comes to the 144,000, you have that number showing up twice, and again, you know, the context there, the first time it talks about the 144,000, immediately afterwards, in that next verse, it says, there was a multitude which no one could number, from every nation on the earth, there in heaven. So 144,000 can't be taken literally. When we get down to the 1,000 years, the passage that comes to my mind is from 2 Peter 3 verse 8, where he says, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. Well, if they're going to take the 1,000 years as literal, then based on the passage from Peter, I could just as easily argue that the 1,000 years actually means 1 day. And to be honest, it's probably closer to the truth. Because we know from Scripture that Jesus is coming back 1 day. And on that day, what's going to happen? The earth is going to be judged. The world and all people are going to be judged. And the believers are going to go to heaven. And do what? Reign with Christ. Live with Him in heaven. But if you're going to take it literal and say that Christ is coming back to earth to set and establish the nation of Israel again here on earth, and we as believers are going to rule the world with Him, well then, based on that Peter passage, hey, it's only going to be 1 day. Common sense, right? And the rest of Scripture dictates and tells us you can't take the 1,000 years there as literal. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The number 666, which we find in Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, that's a literal number. It's a number given to those congregations and to us, through which we can figure out who that beast is. The Lord has John write, let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. It's possible. It's possible. And the people of John's time probably had a better idea. I mean, the rest of those chapters do tell us, and it's not that difficult to figure out. But they, reading that, probably knew more immediately than we do. We find these numbers 7, 10, 3, 12 throughout Scripture, and it's not just in Revelation. And if you break these numbers down, it's rather interesting that, you know, they all break down to 1 and 3. 3 for the Trinity, 1 for God. The 3 in 1 God. And all the other numbers that are in Scripture, what do we say? Derive from it. 7 days of creation, 3 plus 3 plus 1. 7 is often referred to as the number of holiness, the number of perfection. 10, 3 plus 7 is the number of completeness. 4, of course, the 4 corners of the earth, the number for man. 12 is, of course, the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles. And when you get again to the 1,000 years, that's what? 10 times 10 times 10. 3 tens multiplied. And so the 1,000 years is figurative, representing at the end of a completed time, a set time by God, comes the judgment day. And the Father only knows, even as Jesus has said. So, when we run across these numbers, context, the rest of Scripture, and common sense tells us, hey, this is literal, this is figurative. And often, or many times, what is figurative is the thing mentioned. The thing mentioned. One last thing that did occur to me is that in reading Revelation, we want to remember that it's God giving us His view of what's going on earth. It's from heaven looking down on earth. And so again, we're not bringing God down to earth and looking up. God is bringing us up to heaven, and we are looking down.